Senator Pocock.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President, and I thank Senator McKim for this bill and the opportunity to debate this. I welcome this bill. For more than 20 years, the plight of asylum seekers and refugees in trying to reach Australia has been politicised. Successive governments have been in what seems to be a race to the bottom, campaigning on fear, division and cruelty. But this is an issue about people. We must remember that. This is about people and not politics. As politicians, we have a responsibility to the people that we represent, and we have a responsibility to build a nation that we can be proud of. A nation that treats everyone with respect and dignity, and that faces complex challenges with courage, with open debate, and ultimately, in the end, I would hope with unity. In recent years, we have not faced this issue with unity and courage. People seeking asylum and refugees have been used as political footballs, with all sides using them for cheap point scoring. The 150 people that remain in Papua New Guinea and Nauru are victims of our collective political failure. There are certain basic human rights that everyone should have. We should all have the right to work, to put food on the table, and have a roof over our heads. For those 150 people, these rights have been grossly violated. This bill is an opportunity to change that. If this bill is passed, there would finally be an offer to transfer people from offshore detention in PNG and Nauru to Australia, with the significant caveat that they are not subject to an adverse security assessment by ASIO. I think that's a really important caveat, and I think something that people pounce on when we talk about security threats and the impost on communities here in Australia. In Australia, they would have access to the medical treatment and mental health support that they require. The mental health support that, in many cases, they desperately require. Reading through the submissions to the inquiry into this bill was a moving and sad experience. It just reinforces that this is dealing with human beings like all of us, people who have hopes and dreams for their lives, and for whatever reason have found them in a situation where they were so desperate that they decided that they needed to up and leave everything they knew, their family, to seek safety. And they have sought safety from Australia. And reading this report, we are failing them. In the words of one of my constituents, a Canberran, Peter, who made a submission to the inquiry, I'll quote him. "The human face of the policy for those remaining in Papua New Guinea and Nauru is one of desperate misery, and this for people who risked all to flee oppression, torture and death in their countries of origin. The human face is missing from the committee report into this bill. In fact, accounts from those that are suffering are not even included in the text. So here are some of the stories taken from the submission from the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. Mohammed is a Hazara man from Afghanistan who is currently in PNG. He's been recognised as a refugee. He is currently under severe mental stress because he is worried about his family in Afghanistan who are living under Taliban rule. Mohammed has suffered in offshore detention in PNG for over 9 years now. He has a multitude of untreated health conditions which makes it difficult for him to eat. He also suffers from depression. His doctors suggest he exercises, but Mohammed does not want to leave his house for fear of his safety. To quote Mohammed, "My hopes are to be with family, find work, stand on my own feet, feel independent, and feel like a human, to have a peaceful life. Just do not forget us, and hopefully you can help us get out of this situation. We are stuck and cannot do anything to change our life for the better. Kwara was hospitalised in Nauru earlier this year after he experienced severe pain. He has been approved for transfer, but has still not been evacuated or received the medical treatment needed. He says, "My brother is in Australia. I need to go to Australia for treatment. It is easier for me in Australia. I've been to Australia 3 times, had an operation in Brisbane in 2014 for kidney stone removal. Good hospital. I stayed for 2 weeks with a lot of facilities, proper doctors and professionals. There is a lot of humanity. Human beings' health is important in Australia. It is nothing here. Australia is spending a lot of money and could have spent it in a better way." Hiren has been held in Nauru for over 9 years now. He was transferred to Australia in February 2023 for urgent medical treatment for chronic pain conditions. Hiren has been held in closed hotel detention. He has not been told when he will be released from detention. He says, "People are getting crazy. Health issues are worsening. People are scared for their safety. Locals swear at refugees. Get people out of this situation, please. They are under a lot of stress and face a great uncertainty. Pay attention to the corruption and torture that is continuing to go on in offshore detention." Former Australian of the Year in 2010, psychiatrist Professor Patrick McGorry has described offshore detention centres as factories for producing mental illness. It's no surprise we hear stories of people who've been locked up for a decade and they have health conditions, mental health conditions, and that's on us. That is on us. That is a direct result of politicians' policies. We have to own that, and we have an opportunity to change that. Médecins Sans Frontières found that amongst the 208 refugee and asylum seekers they had assessed on Nauru, 129, or 62%, were diagnosed with moderate to severe depression. The second highest diagnosis was anxiety disorder, 1 in 4, followed by PTSD, 18%, mild depression, 11%, complex trauma, 6%, and resignation syndrome, 6%, also known as traumatic withdrawal syndrome. We can't ignore this. We know what is happening. There are a small number of people who we keep offshore for political reasons. Please think about these people. And then clearly there's the economic cost. Offshore centres cost around $9.6 billion in the 3 years between 2013 and 2016. That's an extraordinary amount of money. They continue to cost around $1 billion a year to run, which comes to over $500,000 per asylum seeker per year. This doesn't make sense. There has to be a better way to do this. Offshore detention is cruel. It causes the destruction of the physical and mental health of those who seek our care and our community. The time has come for Australia to adopt a more compassionate and humane approach to refugees and asylum seekers. We have to grapple with this issue. We have to grapple with the national security concerns, the concerns that Senator Scarr rightly raised about Border Force having to deal with horrendous scenes. And we have to grapple with the fact that these are people who are desperate. People like you and I who are seeking our support, and we're locking them up and spending a huge amount of our money to do so. We can and must find a way to ensure that people do not die at sea and people also do not languish in indefinite detention. I believe we need to start to play a more active role in our region. People are only leaving because their situation is intolerable or their life is at risk. We need to stand up alongside calls that call out human rights abuses in other countries. And we really need to start thinking about how we're going to deal with climate refugees. Because if we look back at the last couple of decades, if we think we've had a refugee problem over any of those years, we haven't seen anything. And the thing to think about, and I'd encourage the major parties to start thinking about this, is that when we start seeing the spiralling, compounding effects of climate change, our Pacific neighbours are probably not going to be in a position to just do our dirty work. People in those countries are could potentially be looking to Australia, saying, we can't cope here, we need support. This is a really tough problem, but ignoring it or locking up 150 people and hoping that that solves the problem doesn't. So I urge the Senate. I understand that this is not something the major parties will entertain, but I urge you in your party rooms and in your thinking, start listening to the Australian community. Once we see these sorts of stories, we start to understand the people and how desperate they are seeking our support. People want a more pragmatic, humane approach. So I thank Senator McKim for bringing this bill to the Senate, and it does have my support. A number of Canberrans contact me on a regular basis about this. Not only this, people languishing in our community on bridging visas, people who've had small businesses for 10 years, contributing, paying tax, but don't have access to services, to tertiary education, all of the things that many of us take for granted. So thank you, Senator McKim, and I support